for this particular session to hear what's in the room again. And I remember our first check-in question about what you want to really look at for this conference was about how to unplug, how to have a healthy balance. I saw that a lot. So let's bring your voices in the room. We're going to do a Google form together, and I'm going to send it right now. All right, so 57 people responded. It's going up still. Thank you very much. So it looks like for the first question, approximately how many total hours do you think you use your phone and or technology in a day? Wow, it looks like 67% of the 58 people that responded so far says more than 4 hours. And, you know, obviously that's also for schoolwork. If you have work, that's online too. This question is somewhat general, but it just kind of shows where we spend our time. And then what social media apps? So it looks like, it keeps going up here. Sorry about that. Hopefully it stays. So it looks like Instagram. I think the reason why it keeps going up is because the chat's open. All right, I think we're good here if I keep that open. Okay, so 79% says that Instagram is social media app they use. YouTube is pretty high as well, Snapchat, Twitter. Facebook is the lowest. And I love that people are adding in their own technologies like TikTok. A lot of my high schoolers love that. It looks pretty cool, actually. I love that. I learned being a social media app, totally. I really apologize for the screen jumping. I'm not sure how to stop it. So homework and schoolwork, yes, yes. So how do you feel after using your phone? Let's see. Eye strain, headache, empty. So as you can see, we all have different experiences, and yet I'm definitely seeing patterns here. Numb, disconnected. I've seen empty 4 times now. And I thought it would be interesting to start this session with a little what's in the room, right? So thanks for participating. Yeah. That's great.
So I had the opportunity of meeting with Tiffany Shlain. So Tiffany is right now in an unplugging day with her family. And this is, as you'll learn from her in this interview, she does this every week. She and her family go through a no screen day from Friday night until Saturday night. So we're about to hear from her. So Tiffany has received numerous awards and distinctions for her films. She creates short films, each of them with meaning and purpose. And she's been acknowledged by Newsweek magazine as one of the women shaping the 21st century. She's premiered a number of films at Sundance, as you can see here. I think if you find your way to her page, you're going to see film after film that deeply touches you and informs you. She's about mixing the arts with good science and humanistic themes, and really believing in the best of humanity, as you'll see. So we're about to watch a couple of her films, but let's first of all go and meet the filmmaker. And then, since this is up, let's also acknowledge Cece Duchette, who will be speaking with us after we talk with Tiffany. And she's the founder and director of Wireless Education. And she'll have a lot to share with us. She's been one of the leading educators in the country about how to train our legislators, our teachers, and our policymakers about the reality of these things we're looking at. So that's coming up after we speak with Tiffany. So that said, let's listen to Tiffany Shlain. 2 days ago. Just to see this review. Yeah, we wish you could be with us directly. So thank you.
I know you have to plan your next one not on a Saturday.
Probably.
Then I know it's hard because I do no screens and no work on Saturdays. So
yeah,
it's hard when.
Well, you're walking your talk right now. So
yeah.
So you just wrote this book, 24/6.
Yes.
Unplugging, the power of unplugging 1 day a week.
Yes.
You talk about in your films and the book itself how this came about, but for our general audience, what caused this to be a reality for you? What made this something you wanted to do?
I was like everyone, just everyone before the pandemic, just all over the place and on screens all the time. I never really felt present. And then in the period of a couple days, my father died of brain cancer, and he and I were incredibly close, and my daughter was born. And it was really like life was grabbing me by the shoulders and saying, focus on what's important. And so my husband and I and our daughters, we started turning off all screens one day a week for what we call our technology Shabbats. And so it's been over 10 years now, and it's been the best thing I've ever done in my life. It's brought such presence and creativity and insights and like groundedness and connectedness. It has like so many benefits that grow exponentially every year I've done it. And it's been so long that I finally had to write a book. And I actually feel like we're in one of those moments again, collectively as a society, or as humanity, where I feel like the earth is grabbing us by the shoulders and saying, focus on what's important. And we were everywhere and nowhere and traveling all over the world and doing all this, distracted all the time. And I think a lot of people are sheltered in place, if you're lucky enough to be, and really rethinking what's important and what matters. So it's a very similar moment that led to huge behavioral change for me, real impactful change for me. So I'm hopeful that this will be an opportunity for everyone to make some changes in their lives for the better.
Well, and you're 10 years into this, if I heard you correctly. We had a, just
I'm sorry?
we had a little glitch.
I know. I was like, it's like, yeah.
So you're 10 years into this. So you must have learned a few things having practiced this for 10 years now.
Yeah.
Have you noticed any differences from the early years? How has it changed over your years?
Yeah, I just look forward to it in the biggest way, because I mean, my best ideas come on Saturdays without a doubt. And I think, there's so much research, neuroscience research behind why that is. I've made a film called A Case for Dreaming, which looks at the neuroscience of daydreaming. And there's a reason why your best ideas come from when you're doing the dishes or on a walk or in the shower. And it's because you're just processing what's already in your mind and not adding new stimulation.
Right.
And right now we're living in a world where we're just constantly distracting ourselves or escaping or interacting, or there's so much all the time. We never let our minds have that moment of just processing what's already in there, which is when my best ideas happen. So after doing this for 10 years, I just know now that those ideas, so we do it from Friday to Saturday night. And I also,
sorry.
It's okay. We do it from Friday to Saturday night. And I also spend a lot of time Saturday morning. First of all, I sleep the best on Friday night. And then Saturday morning, I usually journal. And I try to do that throughout the week too, but I do my deep thinking and deep reflecting on Saturday. And I just can have insights and perspective that I couldn't if I was responding to my phone and all the buzzing and notifications. I should say we have a landline for emergencies if anyone really needs to reach us. And in 10 years, that's hardly ever rang.
That says something.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's fascinating. And this addictive power of technology, the way it grabs us and holds our attention, that whole dopamine dance that you've talked about. I would guess your family's closer. I'm guessing that it's not just about creativity, it's about
I should have started with that, because that's the biggest thing, is just the connectedness, like the authentic connectedness with the people I live with and my husband and daughters. But I think that can be with whoever, if you live with someone or if you're by yourself, just connecting to yourself, just stilling the wind on the water and looking at what's inside, which is a Buddhist expression. But I love thinking about that because there's so much stimulation and noise all the time. And we are all addicted to these devices, and they are tapping into our dopamine rewards every second. And we need to be comfortable with just being and having our own thoughts and not being influenced by so much around us. And I think one full day every week to just regroup, process, reflect, see what you're really thinking, read in a deeper way, connect in a deeper way. And it seems to have the staying power for the other 6 days. I mean, I think there's a reason why this ritual has lasted over 3,000 years, called Shabbat or the Sabbath. Now, I'm not a religious person, but most people that I know that do a full day of rest are very religious. And I have great respect for if that's why they do it. But what was so exciting to me as a cultural Jew was really discovering this practice from a non-religious place and looking at it really like from like yoga and meditation, that these are these ancient practices that can bring such profound impact to your life, and everyone, make it available to everyone. And that's really why I wrote the book.
I grew up practicing a Sunday, and it was fairly strict to my family. And
Yeah.
we weren't really religious per se, but we were spiritual, and we used that day way back then, long before the internet. But so I have some remembrance of that as well.
Yeah, family day. And we used to do that too, but it seems like it's kind of evaporated. People are so overscheduled and everyone's on their screens and all over the place. And it's really about a recentering every week. Like, especially during the pandemic, it's like 10 times more important. Everyone's like, are you still doing texture bots during the pandemic? I'm like, are we still, first of all, we always do texture bots. So like my saving grace, and they're 10 times more important right now because we're on the screens 10 times more right now because we're on it for everything. Yeah. And I'm already looking forward to turning them off tomorrow night because they're exhausting also. I mean, they're a lifeline right now, but I feel just exhausted by the end of the day with how much I'm having to be online because you're trying to like push all your energy through that screen or receive it all, and it's exhausting.
Well, and I'm just noticing the work you've done in the world, your films, the way you integrate art. I'm very interested in new media forms and integrated media, and so the way you weave narrative and film and audience participation and all of that has always fascinated me. And it seems a theme that runs through your work has a lot to do with a certain belief in humanity, if I may. Can you talk more about that? Well, why is it you seem to have such faith in us, given that we often are running into great problems through our behavior?
That's a great question. I do believe in humanity, and I feel really fortunate that my mother is still alive, and my father, while he's passed away, they always believed in me. And I think their belief in me made me rise up and do more. And when you say, do I believe in humanity? I do believe you can kind of will the best of humanity into existence. And that if you approach the world that the world's going to hell, there's a better chance it's gonna not go in a good direction. If you say, I believe in humanity, I believe in our better nature, I believe it'll strengthen that part of humanity too. So a lot of my films do that. And I do study history, and I do feel like we are evolving. I mean, women's rights and gay rights and, acceptance of different religious beliefs or no religious beliefs. Or if you look at the continuum, I mean, it's often like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but all in all, and disabled rights, and we are evolving. So if you look at that greater arc of history and say we are evolving and we need to inspire and push us to our better nature, that if you looked at my films, you're right, that would be the thread but I do think it comes from having parents that really pushed me to try to be the best that I could be. And I think that's a way, just to think about fellow humans. And I'm seeing so many beautiful acts of humanity through this period. I mean, seeing so much beautiful compassion and creativity and collaboration and neighbors coming together and community. And it's showing me so many beautiful parts of humanity. I feel like we needed it. And with the web, I was very worried we were being so manipulated. I mean, 2 months ago, I did this show at the Museum of Modern Art in New York called Dear Human.
Yes.
It was like the last possible moment I could have done a packed show in a theater in New York. And it was a lot about the history of the web, and I thought we were at this point where it was manipulating the worst of our human strengths. And I ended the show and I said, but could there be a moment where we're reminded that the web can connect us on our best human strengths? And then this happened. So it's like, have renewed hope and love for the web right now, that it's feeling more human with all these Zoom calls and people are using it in this really beautiful way. So can we maintain that after this is over? Like, can we really have behavioral change, really learn lessons? That's my hope. And that's what I'll keep, I've been experimenting a lot with Zoom, this platform we're on. I'm doing another big Zoom experiment on May 6th, if any of your listeners want to do it. And I also have been baking every week. I make fresh bread every Friday, and I've been baking on Zoom. That's been so much fun. And if anybody watching wants to check either of those things out, they can go to TiffanyShlain.com. But I think we're at this really interesting moment for many reasons.
Mm-hmm.
It's fascinating. And it just like COVID exposes, if you have some underlying health issues, it's going to expose them and you might get really sick and die. I think there's a lot of infrastructure systems that were not healthy, that this is fully exposed, and hopefully they're going to go away and we're going to rethink how they work. There's so much inequality. It's exposing so much of that right now. Those that are able to be sheltered in place versus not. So I am hopeful that while laying open all the issues, and some are going to burn to the ground, some systems, how do we rethink a world that we want to live in? I think people are going to question flying around a lot. I think we're going to hopefully be better to the planet. I mean, I'm hopeful. I mean, I'm hopeful. And my husband and I call ourselves optimists. Optimistic and skeptical. Because it's not too Pollyanna, but, and we've been watching a lot of documentaries about like the Spanish flu and,
okay. I understand that got a little problematic. Sorry about that. For some of you, it was breaking apart. I got the message. So hopefully you got the sense of her anyway. Let's take a look at a couple of her films. What do you say? Yeah? So if you'd like, there's a number of them on this one page. Before I start the films, if you go to, let me give you so you can see this. But interesting person, don't you think? Okay. So this is her website, and here's a sense of some of her films. So www.246life.com films. So if you just plug in 24SIX life, 246 life, you'll find it. We're going to watch, there's a number of them here, all of them really memorable. It's like good food. You don't want to eat it all at once. You don't want to just have a gorge. And I would set aside a little time and watch each of these with a little time to reflect. We're going to watch one called Dear Student, which speaks to your age group and sort of part of what we're talking about. So this is one of hundreds of her films. All right, let's try one more, huh? Lost my thread here. Hold on. Give me a sec. First of all, just while this is loading, I find it really interesting to see how the art woven into a short film sends a similar message to the speakers in the last session, but quite different at the same time, right? So. There you go. And this is her larger film on a technology sabbat or Sabbath. And let's take a look.
I love technology. Like everyone, I'm totally addicted. But it's also consumed all of my time, where I feel like I'm constantly responding to everyone and not really responding to myself in some ways.
But a few years ago, I started thinking a lot about time. My father was dying of brain cancer, and sometimes he only had 1 good hour a day. So it made me think about how little of time we have. And during that time, my family and I decided to completely unplug from technology 1 day a week. We call it our technology Shabbats. We've done it every week for more than 3 years, and it's completely changed my life. I'm Tiffany Shlain. I'm a mother, filmmaker. I founded the Webby Awards. And this series is about how the future doesn't start somewhere far off in the distance. The future starts here. I'll start by saying that I'm Jewish. Wait, no, but I'm not religious. But I love the rituals. I love the rituals. I'm culturally Jewish. And there's this organization I'm a part of called Reboot that was doing a national day of unplugging several years ago. And my family and I did it. And it was such a profound experience that we've done it every week since. It's like our modern version of a very old Jewish tradition of taking 1 day off a week called Shabbat. We still drive cars and use electricity, but for us, no screens, no TV, no cell phone, or anything that pulls us away from being together. It's our interpretation of the essence of Shabbat, being present. And the idea of taking a day off has happened all over the world in all these different cultures. To take breaks, pray, do rituals, or to experience time in a different way. In the Jewish tradition, it's from sundown Friday to sundown Saturday, what one of my favorite Jewish philosophers, Heschel, calls a palace in time. For Muslims, the sacred day is Friday. For most Christians, it's Sunday. And for the never-distracted Buddha, you could just say that being enlightened, he was having Shabbat all the time. But with all these new delicious technologies today, when do we ever get the space to take time off? I mean, doesn't it feel like you're always being distracted or beeped at or tweeted or... I mean, I just feel like I'm influenced by so many different things. I feel like I'm in an emotional pinball machine. It just seems like a good idea to have 1 day where no one gets to affect your mood except yourself and the people that you love right around you. Now, taking this 1 day off from technology every week, I feel so much more grounded and balanced. My husband Ken and I try to be as unavailable as possible, except to each other and our children. I feel like a better mother, wife, and person. Every week, it's like a valve of pressure releases from the bombardment of interesting facts, articles, and tidbits I consume daily as I travel on this info rocket of discovery, procrastination, productivity, and then eventually overload. Now, there's so much good that comes from technology. Just know that I believe that. But I also think about what it's taking away. Being present, being focused in the moment.
No radio, TV, even the wire services are cut. It's like sounds hanging in midair.
Researchers have compared the sense of technological dependency
on the feeling that we must be accessible and responsive at any time to that of drugs and alcohol. And it's all because of this hormone dopamine, which is related to mood, attention, and desire, whether it's for knowledge, food, or sex. And it tells you that when you get something and it feels good, you want more of it. So when you're up late when you're up late, hopefully not licking, I mean, clicking from website to website or compulsively texting or emailing, those are dopamine-induced loops. And just as we've discovered the hard way, when we have too much sugar or too much alcohol, you can have too much information. I believe we're only at the beginning of truly understanding the effects of too much technological stimulation on the brain.
Smooth as a baby's bottom. The memory has been removed, like chalk, erased from the blackboard.
So as we rush into this era of hyper-connected human evolution, we need to evolve and adapt to be more mindful of what we're doing online and when we should go off. Since we've unplugged on Saturdays, our Saturdays now feel like mini vacations, slow living that we savor like fine wine. We garden, we take bike rides, we do art projects. We're just present with the people right in front of us. And it's such a beautiful day. It's my favorite day of the week. Now there's one other benefit to unplugging each week. By sundown on Saturday night, we can't wait to go back online. We appreciate technology all over again. But more importantly, the one day off to rest and think about the world makes me reinvigorated to engage in the world with a new perspective. So every week, we remember that the most important thing about technology is it has an off switch. So do you want to try it with us this weekend? Think about it. You can do all those things you've been putting off. Garden, call your mom, look out the window, read a book, unplug.
Deserves a little, anyone wants to join, just amazing.
Let's kick off with, as we talked of, everything we mentioned, and just continue, shall we? And
All right.
welcome to us, and share more about who you are and what you have to give us today.
Will do. I am just so pleased to be with you guys here today. I fell down the rabbit hole with wireless technology back when you guys were probably in high school. And I had a daughter who was in high school at the time and one in college. And I was at book group one night, and a girlfriend of mine who's an electrical engineer tipped us off that there could be something up with wireless and health. So that's where I started doing the deep dive. And I had spent 8 years bringing wireless technology into my kids' schools. I was, you know, a do-good mom. I was helping and volunteering and doing fundraising.
Yeah.
And then I started doing the research. And I'm a technical and professional writer by trade. And it really didn't take me very long at all to find literally thousands of studies showing all this harm. So I sort of passed it off to my schools thinking, you know, if this were a gas leak in the science lab, we would have vacated the building immediately and protected the kids. But I got back crickets. Like, I'm passing them things like the French National Library took Wi-Fi out in 2008. I'm showing them pockets of Israel and Belgium and Italy where they've removed it from the schools. And I got back nothing. And long story short, when they looked at the legal fine print that comes with all of our devices, that's where my school started paying attention. I would invite any of you who have an iPhone to grab that right now. You don't have to go into active mode, but I'd like you to get your iPhone, if you have one, and go into settings. Okay, once you're in settings, scroll down just a little ways and hit general. Sunny, I appreciate that you gave me the head nod if you want to kind of be my guide there. Thank you. So if you have an older iPhone, then from general up at the top, you hit about. If it's a newer iPhone, from general, you just scroll all the way down to the bottom. And somewhere around second from the bottom, you'll see something like legal or legal and regulatory. Okay, hit that. And then there's a short little menu there. And at the bottom of that, I think you'll probably see RF exposure. Yeah. I like your big eyes, Denny. So when we read that legal fine print that's been in there the whole time, it tells us a couple of really important things. One, it gives you a distance, which means keep this device X amount of distance from your body, or you may exceed the FCC limits for public radiation exposure. Right? Right? And two, use a hands-free option, because by simply touching that device with your hand in the way that they give it to us, you are now being exposed to 5 or 6 separate antennas. You've got a cellular, a data, a Bluetooth, a Wi-Fi, a locator, and by now a hotspot, because they're using us as the network. Who would know, right? So the message is certainly not no technology. The message is safe technology. And as we're discussing today, appropriate technology, right? So when I figured this out and I shared it with my schools, when they read that legal fine print, they put together a subcommittee, and we actually became the first public school district in the United States to even have this little sign hanging in all of our classrooms that says to turn off the devices when you're not using them. Otherwise, they're pulsing all the time. And turn off the Wi-Fi. Like, don't be sitting around under Wi-Fi routers and stuff. And always place the device on a solid surface, preferably something other than your body. And they even tell us that in the fine print, right? And so we became the first to do this. And when I first saw my schools put it up, it said best practices for Wi-Fi safety. But when they rolled it out, they dumbed it down to best practices for mobile devices. And I was working for the schools at the time, and I was sitting there during that training, and I go, well, wait, what just happened? They showed that information, and then they moved on to the next topic during the teacher training. And I was like, well, they didn't tell the teachers this is two-way microwave radiation, and it's especially harmful to kids and pregnant teachers and the elderly who have cognitive issues with radiation. So I went to our superintendent the next day and I said, you know, first I'm grateful because I've seen time and again in videos from all over the country where parents whose kids have gotten sick from this do the research, they try to bring it forward, and these schools are so deep in bed with industry that they just don't want to listen. So I dug deeper and we found out that what happened is the industry, being clever, very smart people, penetrated at the state level. And at the State Department of Education, they said, here's all this great new technology that our children are going to need to have. And they made all these sweetheart deals to get wireless into the schools because by and large, they recognized that you guys were an untapped market. And once you have a child as a consumer, quite often you get to keep them for life. So it's a brilliant marketing strategy if it weren't so toxic. So when our schools did this, I went back the next day to my superintendent and I said, Mr. Adams, first, I'm so grateful that we have this, but we didn't tell them it's microwave radiation that's really being shown to be harmful in the independent peer-reviewed science. So he just held up his hands and he said, I'm sorry, that's as far as I can take it because that's what school committee has assigned me to do. And I went, and he was new. He was a new superintendent, but a good guy. And I said, okay, how can we tell the parents then? Because even if the parents knew to create a safe learning and sleeping and living environment at home, then our bodies can properly cell repair and regenerate at night. Our DNA is still forming at night when we're kids. At least if the parents knew that this invisible thing like carbon monoxide is just sitting there pulsing at us 24/7, then at least we could start getting proper sleep, which leads to a lot of health benefits. Or if we don't get proper sleep, as some of our colleagues this morning presented, headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, insomnia, learning disabilities. You know, it's a neurotoxin and it hits the immune system especially hard. So he said, I can't take this any further. I can only do what school committee said. I said, okay, back to the drawing board. What else can we do? I had already spoken to our town's health agent, and he was around in the 1990s when the first cell towers came in, and they were told at the municipal level that they have to pay attention to the state has to pay attention to the federal level, and at the federal level, the industry had lobbied to get the Telecom Act passed that said if anyone claims any harm environmentally, which now they're saying health as well, you're just out of luck. And I said, well, how can that be? Well, the industry wrote the law. They lobbied, they wrote the law, they promoted the economic benefit, and here we are. So our health agent didn't know, our librarian didn't know, our schools didn't know, and I had helped to resuscitate our local education foundation when our kids were in school, and I served alongside my state senators. So I went to her local coffee hours and I said, Senator Spilka, look at what this science is telling us. Look at what Ashland has done. And I have a meter that measures radio frequency or microwave or EMFs, whatever you want to call it. It's called an acoustimeter. Has anybody shown you something like this today? Okay, so this is an invisible toxin, right? We can't see it, we can't hear it, we can't smell it, we can't taste it, but our cells feel it. And some of us really do feel it, but we don't know to connect the dots to this. So I've never felt good under the fluorescent lights. It makes me jiggity. So I've always in my offices just hopped up on the desk and unscrewed those fluorescent tubes, and then I just put incandescent light and lamp in my office. And people will come in and they just pop into my office for no good reason other than, hey, Cease, I love your office. It feels so good in here. And they just sit down and hang out. And it's because their bodies knew that all of this man-made EMF is not good for us. So in order to know what we're dealing with, I ultimately figured out that you can buy a radio frequency detection meter and then you can measure. Once you measure, you have your data, and then do the gap analysis. What do I have that's causing exposures? What can I do device by device to get to safe technology? So if there were no radio frequency in my setting here, it would just crackle a little bit when I turn it on. And I do have some bleed in from my neighbors and their routers and stuff, but I've created a pretty safe sanctuary in my home. So this is where my house is. You can see it light up a little bit green there, and that's at the level where the scientific literature is still investigating what the biological impact is, because there is no safe level of radio frequency radiation identified in the scientific literature. No safe level. So our goal is to get to as low as reasonably achievable, and I'm going to show you how. So I do own a cell phone. It's an old hand-me-down one from my husband, and I only take it out with me when I am on the go, and if I have an emergency or if I know somebody's looking for me, I'll turn it on. But otherwise, I keep it in airplane mode as a rule. That generally disables all those antennas we spoke of. So I'm going to turn it on, my little cell phone here. I'm going to turn it on and watch what happens. I'm taking it out of airplane mode. And here we go. So this is doing this to our cells all day, every day, all night. And when it's in the yellow, that's where people who experience electrical sensitivities or electrohypersensitivity begin to feel those headaches, the nosebleeds, the nausea, the pain, the anxiety, the depression. And when we get into red, we literally have thousands of studies all over the world showing this is biologically harmful. So, you know, I didn't want to believe any of this. I was kind of enjoying, you know, what everybody else was. Hang on, I just want to put this back in airplane mode real quick. So what I did is in my house, I have a landline and a great phone that I bought for like 20 or 30 bucks at Staples, right? It's got speakerphone, so when I'm doing a call, I can put it on speakerphone. I can still sit here and do my work. And then as I was figuring all this out, we had those decked cordless phones all over our house, right? And that's like having your own little private cell tower too, because here in the US, those constantly beacon the radio frequency, whether anybody's using the phone or not. In Europe, they have an eco mode out of Germany, I think, but our industry has not seen fit to adopt that here yet. So I paid good money for all those phones. And so I didn't want to just get rid of them, but ultimately that's what I did. I was thinking about donating them to our local, you know, food family services pantry, but I didn't want to expose anybody else to that radiation. So I recycled the batteries and chucked them. But then, you know, my daughter, my younger daughter was 15 when I figured this out. And the poor kid, she had to be my kid, right? I know when you're 15, you want to be just like your peers and you don't want to be singled out because every cell in your body is changing every day. And it's a fun, wild, crazy place to be, but you don't want to be the kid of that mom, right? Well, sorry, I was that mom. So I come home from the Apple store after I figured out, but guess what? You can hardwire a cell phone, right? How crazy is that? So all that means is somewhere where you're getting your technology feed into the house, you have a modem or a router that has Ethernet jacks in the back, right? So get yourself an Ethernet cord. These things are all cheap, right? 5, 10, 15 bucks. Plug that into an RJ45 Lightning to Ethernet LAN adapter. This little cord here costs about 30 bucks. RJ45 Lightning to Ethernet LAN adapter, right? And then you just plug it into your phone, okay? So, and I know a lot of kids these days don't make many phone calls. So anything you're doing on the internet, you get a great option with hardwiring your technology. So just remember though, once you hardwire it, it doesn't automatically turn off the radiation. You just need to pop into settings. And in some phones, if you go into airplane mode, it turns off all the antennas, but you still have a fully functioning device. The Apple products I've heard you need to be careful with because sometimes they'll do updates and flip things back on when you're not really looking. So just before you pick up a device, make sure it's in the mode that you want to be in, right? So if you're only texting, turn off, you know, the data, turn off the Bluetooth, turn off the Wi-Fi, turn off the locator, turn off the hotspot, and look at how much you've just reduced your exposure. So that's what you can do for an iPhone. For like a MacBook, you can get a Thunderbolt adapter. So now what do? You've got two devices. So how do you plug that in? Well, my daughter's a junior at the University of Delaware. And actually, when she was down there, she had something happen to her phone and she had bought the insurance plan on it, thankfully. And so they sent her a new phone, but they sent it to me in Massachusetts instead of her school address. So she said, hey, Mom, when that comes, will you send it down? And I went, sure, under one condition. And I'm like, all right, here we go. Time for a little mommy blackmail, right? So I said, I will send it down to you if you promise me you're going to hardwire it in your apartment, because she's living off campus this semester, right? And my husband's looking at me going, you're mean. Well, my daughter's already had a chunk of cancer removed from her back. Anybody with an existing health compromise, in addition to being a child whose DNA is still developing, anybody with any kind of a health compromise is particularly vulnerable to radio frequency radiation because your body's already got an undue burden. And now you're adding all this spiked, erratic pulse of microwave radiation. So I said, okay, here's the happy medium. I'll go online and I will get what she needs to hardwire her apartment. So I got her a 50-foot Ethernet cable because her router was in the living room of her apartment. And I got her a roll of tape like they use on movie sets, gaffer's tape, so she could tape it down neatly and not create a hazard. And then I got her a switch, an Ethernet switch. This just allows you to plug in multiple devices at once, right? So it plugs into your router on this end. You plug the other end in to one of these holes. And then you just take a couple of short Ethernet cables to plug in your iPhone and your iPad with these little adapters. So it's not rocket science, you guys. And you guys are all smarter than any of us here. You can figure this out. But I said to her, I said, okay, send me a picture when you've got it all hooked up. And she did me one better. She videotaped from her living room, from the router, through the kitchen, down the hallway, and she had taped it off beautifully. And now, this is an older Ethernet cable, but now you can get flat ones so they don't even create a bump in the carpet or whatever. So she showed me, she had her cell phone hooked up, she had her tablet hooked up, or her MacBook. And now when she's in her apartment, she has perfectly safe technology. And she just went in and turned off all the antennas on that. So I wanted you guys to have a sense of what safe technology looks like, because this is all invisible and we don't want it to be theoretical. We want it to be very practical. So one of the other things I saw somebody posting about earlier was, what about those Bluetooth headsets? Well, not such a good idea to put a microwave transmitter here and here, likely sending data back and forth to wherever you've got that device around your body. What you can do is look for something called an air tube or a hollow tube headset. So look at it, there's just rubber on the tip. You don't want to put anything metal near your head because metal conducts radiation, right? So this hooks over the ear, goes in, you know, hooks over the ear. It's got a nice little volume control and a mute and stuff on it. And you'll see it's also got a couple of beads. This breaks any radio frequency that might be hitting the wire and coming up. So it breaks that harm. Oh, good. Sunny, what you got there?
No,
So,
these are my Beats that are Bluetooth, and I got them because they were free when I got my computer. I said I was a student, but just like weeks after I got them, they totally just like,
yeah.
So they make it so expensive and it's not even worth it anyway.
No, it's not. And so the year that I figured this one out, I put these in my kids' Christmas stockings. Sometimes they use them, sometimes they don't. And, you know, I had to learn early on in this journey, I can't make anybody do anything. All I can do is provide you guys with the information, and what you choose to do with that, that's your business. But you need to know that there's a lot of risk involved. So that's, and if anybody uses an Android system, you know, there are adapters for that too. There's a company online called Pluggable, and just go in and go into one of their chats and stuff, or go look up where people have sent in information saying, yeah, it worked great for my device. Somebody else will say, my device, the platform doesn't have the functionality to do hard wiring. So, oh, Ken's giving me a 1 minute, is that right? Okay. Another thing that I wanted to encourage you guys, use your voice. You know, I didn't plan to be in this space at all. I have just helped New Hampshire get the first national law passed to investigate the health and environmental impact of wireless radiation. So we are doing our darndest to protect you guys, and they're actually bringing in the real experts and the science and the industries at the table too. So they can't just sit there and say, blah, 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 no harm, because our scientists are taking them to the mat. So we are doing our best to get you guys. Another thing before I close, has anybody heard of earthing or grounding? Okay, so basically every living thing was meant to be connected to the earth, because we get electrons from the earth that go into our body and help to regulate our own EMF field. We are bioelectrical beings. But yet we live off the ground, right? We drive off the ground, we sleep off the ground. We now have rubber-soled shoes that are not conductive. Leather is conductive, but sometimes they put a liner in there that breaks that conductivity with plastic or something. So I'm here in the Northeast, and after I read the science in the earthing book, I'm thinking, yeah, I want to be outside and get myself connected every day and get that healing energy from the earth. But I live in the Northeast. I grew up in California, though. I'm from Orange. Right on. So I was so grateful. There's this Dr. Laura Conover who calls herself the intuition physician, and she's just an amazing woman, a great mom, a great scientist. And she is right now releasing a new book. And she asked me to read the manuscript. This is a manuscript. I haven't seen the real book yet. But what an honor that we crossed paths, and she said, hey, Cease, would you read this? And if you like it, would you write me a statement of support? And I said, sure. Well, I loved it. because you don't have to take your shoes off and go stand on the grass because there's snow on the ground here a lot of the year and it's really cold. She takes it season by season and gives dozens of ways to get outside and naturally ground. If you have a pet and they're on the grass, rub their little snout or their ears, because that's, don't go for the furry parts. You want the ones that are the higher water content. Same thing with the plants. Touch the pine needles, touch the leaves. You don't want to hug the tree because it's insulated through the bark. But there are dozens of ways. I can even go in my garage, which is just a cement floor. That's just sand and water. And I can take off my shoes and ground in the garage or in my basement. But you want it, the blacktop doesn't work because it's got a petrolatum product in there that blocks the EMFs from coming up from the earth. So I hope I've given you guys some constructive ways to take charge. Don't wait for public policy to catch up, because that is a marathon. I thought it would be a sprint, and we want to protect you guys as soon as possible. So hardwire. Professor Burrows, if you would like, I just gave a talk for about an hour this week in Santa Barbara, and I have a whole presentation that I could email to you that you're welcome to share with the students, and it's got links to a lot of the things that I talked about today. Okay. Oh, you're muted, Ken.
There you go. Thank you. Yes, we would love that. We'd love that. We're just a bit over now, so we wanted to ask a few more questions, but maybe, Zara, one good question from our audience list, and we plan an exercise and that, but we're just, time-wise, is there a good question that stood out to you, Zara?
Sure. I'll actually just share both, CC, and you can answer which one you want. One is about around how do we minimize exposure when we have to touch screens. And then the other, such a big topic right now, is saying my county, this comes from Sarah, wants to implement hotspots for children for remote learning. And what are the options when this is a cost issue and an equity issue?
Well, we have to look at this issue from two angles. One is the biological risk. The other, as we now know, is the psychological risk. Those schools push this technology, or those industries push this technology into our schools, and yet the science shows children do not learn best from a screen. They learn best from human interaction and interaction with their environment and their peers. In fact, the New York Times did a really good series of articles a year or two ago that starts with a dark consensus begins to emerge that this is not a safe thing for our kids. And then they also talked about the digital divide between the rich and the poor. It's got nothing to do with the technology. It's about putting kids in front of screens and they're not learning as well as we did before we had the screens in the classroom. And the industry, the executives in Silicon Valley are sending their children to schools with no screens, right? And then another article came out called Silicon Valley Nannies Are Phone Police for Kids. They're making their nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children. So what the heck are they doing to ours, right? So we need big change. Human contact is now a luxury good. That's where we are today, right? All stuck behind a screen. But the message is educate, educate, educate. And I was so honored to help build a little nonprofit out of Europe called Wireless Education. Anybody can go to wirelesseducation.org, and for less than the cost of a movie ticket, you can take this little course. It's only about a half an hour online, and that allows everybody to level set with the facts right up front. Because if you start telling everybody, oh my gosh, wireless is dangerous, technology is dangerous, they're gonna be like, go away, I love my screen, right? Level set with the facts up front and start an intellectual conversation. A tip sheet kicks out at the end that you can print, and then sit down at the kitchen table and say, wow, who knew? What's the first thing we might do? Maybe we're gonna turn off the Wi-Fi when we're not using it. Maybe we're gonna agree to keep our cell phones in airplane mode unless we absolutely have to use them. And at that, only turn on the antenna that you need. So there are a lot of solutions, but reach out to those schools that the industry is giving hotspots to and Chromebooks, and ask the industry to provide the Ethernet cable, and the adapters. So if we have to transition into safe technology, at least don't be frying our kids in the process.
Thank you, Cece. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I also wanted to mention 5G or Stop 5G International. We just did another amazing panel today with world-leading scientists and public health experts and a couple of really good lawyers who are on this. And we're going to hold the FCC accountable for this and the industry. So there's lots more out there.
Were there any products that happened from today? And if so, could you send me those links and we'll pass them on to everybody.
Okay, will do.
Okay.
All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there. I know it's like drinking water out of a fire hose when you first learn about this, but you are halfway there already because now you know, and now you have a right to choose.
Thank you.
Cece, I have just a request if you feel like you have the time. I'm about to send a link to a form with questions for speakers. And I mean, I've been seeing people ask a lot of really good questions in the chat. Once I send it out, would you be willing to kind of look at it and maybe add some responses to some
Absolutely.
questions? Great. Thank you.
And kids,
right now.
I'm available. If anybody wants to bring me in to do a webinar with your loved ones, with, you know, colleagues, those of you who work for the university and so forth, I want this fixed. And teaching has been about the quickest way to get people on board, and nothing changes until we then use that knowledge and speak up, because otherwise we're going to wind up with a small cell antenna right outside our home and no break, no choice.
Well, we'd love to invite you to our campus once we normalize and get back connected. So
I would love to. I was supposed to be out there right now. My mom passed last year and we were going to do her celebration of life right now, but I know she's laughing up there at the irony of it all. But yeah, we were going to set something up while I was out there. So I'm so honored that you invited me in to chat with you guys today. Okay.
Yes, and anyone who has a question for Cece, I just sent out the link. Please go there, add your question, and Cece, the link's there for you to look at and respond when you get the chance. Thank you.
Good deal, guys. Hey, have a tech safe day. Mwah.
thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. So we're on break time now. So let's take 10 minutes. We'll be starting our last session at 3:35. So come back at 3:35 for our very last session. Go grab a drink, move around, shake it all off. I know it's a lot to integrate, but we've got a wonderful panel to finish up, and I think they're going to really sort of ring your chimes. So come back, 10 minutes. Thank you again, Cece.